My name is Eric Rangel, and I'm currently undeclared.
My name is Karina Mendoza, and I'm a music education major with a concentration in instrumental music.
My name is Nikki Napolitano. I'm a third-year social work major with a double minor in childhood and adolescent development, as well as Asian American studies.
My name is Cora Sunchin, and I am also a social work major, and I'm a first year.
Thank you. Starting with Cora, your first question is, obtaining rooms on campus for events is becoming increasingly difficult with event services adjusting their policies. What are some alternatives you have in mind in the case Akbayan cannot reserve rooms on campus?
In the case that Akbayan cannot reserve rooms on campus, I would possibly think about outside organizations such as NC PASA, and maybe collaborate with them and ask them if there are any available places that they can offer to us, because I do know that they are here for us as a supportive group for the organizations in the Northern California area. So possibly reach out to outside resources in addition to on-campus resources if that doesn't work out.
If the case Akbayan doesn't have rooms, I would plan to always have plan B because I know it's a reoccurring issue. However, I would also, if an event were to go through and have a room, worst case scenario, we'd have the event outside and have laptops to present presentations and have little small groups rather than one large group. But I will always try to have a plan B if necessary.
In the case that we can't get any rooms on campus, I was thinking of going to the church near the dorms, and if there was anything, I would try my best to make sure that I have a plan B in case in any of these rooms, just making sure that, like, in the case of anything, maybe just go outside. Yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Obtaining rooms on campus for events is becoming increasingly difficult with event services adjusting their policies. What are some alternatives you have in mind in the case Akbayan cannot reserve rooms on campus?
So I think in the event that they can't reserve a room, there should always be backups or even possibly going outside, but it's also just making sure that we adhere to their policy, and even in the event that we might think the policy may need changing, it's just going about that and reforming the system, because nothing's ever perfect, so we can always find alternatives.
Thank you.
So starting with Nikki, your question is, obtaining a venue for PCN is difficult and often requires reservations a long time in advance. So how will you assist the PCN coordinator to ensure that the production will have a venue as soon as possible?
I would speak to the PCN coordinator as soon as they're elected if they have any ideas as to what their venue may or may not be. In addition to that, we plan to have options, not just one, not just plan B or C, like plan in advance. This also may involve planning practice rooms as well, such as SBX, and I am ready to do so. And I know that not everything goes to plan, so prepared to work to fix that.
I think with that being said, I would make sure to have a clear line of communication with the future PCN coordinator as soon as possible, and asking what kind of venues they want. Like, do they want Hammer Theater? Do they want Morris Daly? Do they want Santa Clara Convention Center Theater? So on and so forth. And just having a plan B, but just making sure that all the paperwork gets done.
So as soon as elected, it's necessary just to go over the options the PCN coordinator has and just contacting the venues immediately. And then if they say they're not available, it's always just being flexible maybe with our dates and how many showings we have, as well as just contacting maybe new venues that we haven't used before, going back to the old ones. It just depends on the capacity that we want as well as the show dates as well.
Thank you.
So first and foremost, I would talk to the PCN coordinator and ask them what venues they have been thinking about. And if those venues don't happen to be working out, I would assist them in possibly finding other venues that maybe we've used in the past years for PCN or potential new new venues. But first and foremost, communicate with the PCN coordinator to see what they have planned and expand on that. Work with them, communicate, to just be aware of what their plans are and how I can assist them.
Thank you. Starting with Karina. The position is often stigmatized as booking rooms for events and making sure cabinet is professional. In your own words, how would you describe the position to general members who see otherwise?
I mentioned this before, but in my speech, secretary is so much more than reserving rooms and checking the mailbox. It's also just keeping a clear line of communication with all members and all cabinet, in my opinion, and just really communicating what needs to be done and what rooms need to be reserved, and just supporting, being a supportive role in cabinet, making sure that everyone is okay.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. The position is often stigmatized as booking rooms for events and making sure cabinet is professional. In your own words, how would you describe the position to general members who see otherwise?
If I were to describe the position, I would of course reinforce the organizational and logistical aspect, but it's also just removing the stigma of that and showing your face and just being there at the events, being friendly with all the new gen members and showing them you're more than just those stereotypes that are there. You can also host your own workshops and have fun with the position.
Can you please repeat the question?
Yes. The position is often stigmatized as booking rooms for events and making sure cabinet is professional. In your own words, how would you describe the position to general members who would see otherwise?
So first and foremost, I do believe that the basis of the secretary job is something that is important. And as I said in my speech, I do want to expand on the things that make the secretary what they are and present it to them in a way that is through workshop and to so that they can use the basis of what makes a secretary and incorporate that into their own lives. So again, through passion planners, the basis of a secretary is to schedule rooms. So incorporating my position into their daily lives.
When speaking about position to general members, I would enforce that although secretary is very logistical, and it is booking rooms and whatnot, but secretary is kind of like a mother in a sense, plays a mother position in making sure and supporting the rest of CAB, just as any other CAB member would, as well as trying to make professionalism more enjoyable for general members and everyone in Akbayan as a whole.
All right. Starting with Eric, your question is, well, let's put it into a scenario. It's Camp Revealing Week, and you have Tower Lawn reserved for Camp Revealing, but you haven't gotten the confirmation for it yet. So what steps would you do?
I think the first step that's most important is just communicating with event services, following up with them maybe via email or phone, or just even going in person and checking up with them to make sure that it is confirmed. And if not, it's also just having those backups of looking at other places, maybe such as a nearby park, or getting it just rescheduled, maybe possibly just moving the event somewhere else.
Can you please repeat the question?
So it's Camp Revealing Week, and you have reserved Tower Lawn for Camp Revealing, but you still have not received the confirmation for the event yet. So what steps would you take?
So first, understanding that because Akbayan has had difficulty with event services, I would talk to the camp coordinator and ask them to please think about other options because of the difficulties that we've been having this year. And then based off of what's happening currently, I would ask them to please follow up, ask them to let me know if they need any help and see what we can do to find other venues. But again, just make them aware that we are having difficulties with booking rooms, so plan for that. Have a backup plan, because that's important.
Okay.
Although Tower Lawn is traditionally where Camp Revealing is, I understand that there has been recent conflicts with booking venues and areas for Akbayan events. As both other candidates have said, making a plan B and also communicating with the camp coordinator for possible other options of holding Camp Revealing, whether that be the same park that we use for kickoff picnic and whatnot, it's you need to communicate with the camp coordinator.
I think having a clear line of communication between both camp coordinator and event services, making sure at the beginning of the week, starting on Sunday, making sure that everything is confirmed, having paperwork, copies of paperwork done, and also alternative venues, parks, anywhere, on open space on campus, just to make sure that camp revealing goes smoothly.
Thank you. Starting with Cora. It is the secretary's job to organize all records for the organization. If elected, what cloud storage system, such as Dropbox or organizational systems, do you plan to use to organize all records?
Most likely I would use Google Drive, just because that is a pretty universal platform, and all of us as SJSU students do have access to that. So I would probably use that platform within a drive that's separate for cabinet, but also to utilize other resources. But to have Google Drive as the primary one, and then possibly another platform as another option.
I would say IT would utilize Google services. Google Drive isn't the only service that they provide. They have Google Links and a bunch of other things as well. It just seems to be the most efficient and the most well-known. So it's something that I can use as well as organize easily, as well as other people editing and having their input in an accessible way.
I believe Google Services is very helpful. I use Google. I'm sure everybody uses Google, but if not, I will put it in a Dropbox. I will also place it on my computer, and as well as printing out some of those records, because I think that's important to keep physical copies as well.
I'm open to using both Google Drive and Dropbox, and I'm always open to new ideas as well. So like if elected during the summer, getting acquainted with new other systems, and if I believe the transition will be too difficult, then just sticking with what we know best would be the best solution.
Starting with Nikki, your question is, what is it about the position that inspires you to take it on next year instead of other positions?
Being an OC buy-in member for so long, I've gotten to experience various positions within the org, whether that's being internship, a core member, or even someone's right-hand man for an event. Separating that and getting to oversee events rather than just having a particular passion for just one, in this position I get to oversee everything and put passions where I see fit.
Could you possibly repeat the question, please?
Sure. So the question was, what is it about this position that inspires you to take it on next year instead of other positions?
I think having experience as a Limitless intern and also my outside music major running, it's really helped me, I guess, as a student, and it's good to know, and it's like the backbone. Being secretary is the backbone almost, and just making sure that that you play a supportive role.
I think for me, why I chose secretary, it was kind of strange, but like when talking to like previous secretaries and as well as the current one, it was just like hearing about the issue with event services, like that really stuck out to me. And for me, like I want to make an impact that will help future secretaries. So if I can make their job easier, then who knows what they can do with their time in the future. They can expand on what I've built. So it's just improving our relationships with event services like was something that was very important. Just making that change.
Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. So, what is it about this position that inspires you to take it on next year instead of the other positions?
This position is an area of growth for me. It's not typically something that a first year goes for. It is on the executive board, but for me this was a place of growth. Learning more about myself throughout internship and knowing how well that I believe I succeed with internal conflicts. I believe that I'm much better at solving things internally rather than on an external background. So that is why I chose this position over public relations.
Starting with Karina, name one skill that is crucial to this position and why it is important.
I would have to say organization, because it really is keeping track of all the records, making sure that every event runs smoothly and we have all the rooms, and just, I think that's really important, to just making sure that everyone's on the same agenda and keeping a clear line of communication.
Repeat the question.
Name one skill that is crucial to this position and why it is important.
I think one important skill is patience, just because it is an e-board position, as well as, dealing with other on-campus resources such as event services. It can be daunting, as well as just like organizing all those documents, but if you're patient and you stick through it, then anything is possible.
Could you please repeat the question?
Name one skill that is crucial to this position and why it is important.
One skill that is crucial to this position is communication, because the secretary's primary job is to book rooms and schedule venues. Communication is important because in order to know which venues you have to book, you do have to talk with your cabinet members to understand their needs and how you can best assist them.
I would have to agree with Cora. Communication is used in all responsibilities and aspects of being secretary, whether that's talking to e-board or your fellow cabinet members, or doing paperwork to book rooms. In addition, communication is just strong, should be used in all aspects, as I said, because you're also serving as, to a certain degree, the face of Akbayan, and so you have to be able to communicate with your team as well as general members.
Okay, starting with Eric, your question is, what does professionalism mean to you, and what are some ways that you practice it?
Professionalism to me is just being able to separate your personal life from your work life, and being able to keep a clean image in person as well as social media. And just ways to uphold it is just the way you carry yourself, the language you use, the way you dress. And it's just important to keep that consistency throughout cabinet, just because we all hold positions and people look up to us. So we should serve by example.
Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. Your question was, what does professionalism mean to you, and what are some ways that you practice it?
Professionalism to me means to be presentable. Some ways that I believe I practice it is to grow into the idea that you really do have to separate your professional life from your personal life, because I believe that's where a lot of the problems root from, and so that is something that I'm trying to grow into. But being professional is just, it's being presentable. Being presentable, that is what it means to be professional.
Professionalism is about being presentable and being the way you dress, whether that's how you say something, but it's, as I said in my speech, it's also about your characteristics, building character, whether that's through your experiences or the relationships you have. It's not necessarily neglecting yourself and yourself as an individual, but presenting it in a way where it can be acceptable amongst others.
I'm gonna have to agree with Eric. It's about separating your personal life and your business life, as well as not only just dressing well, but also treating others with respect and having good faith, good character, and good behavior. And just, that's very important amongst professionalism, because ultimately you're not just making friends, but you're also networking.
Starting with Nikki, I believe. Cora, excuse me. Your fellow cabinet member consistently posts inappropriate and unprofessional content on their alternate social media accounts. How would you address the situation? You have 1 minute for your response.
So I would address them one-on-one first and foremost, because I don't believe that is something that you should present in front of all of cabinet, because that's just, yeah, I don't think you should present that in front of all of cabinet. I would ask them to understand that while that account is private, everything on the internet is pretty much permanent, and that could spread around regardless if you only have a certain amount of people posting or viewing your account. It is still out there and it can be easily shared. I would ask them to understand that as a cabinet member, you do have many general members and interns who look up to you and who see you as an example. So you have to understand that something as simple as a bad post that could have alcohol or drugs could really affect the organization as a whole and how people view you as a person first and foremost. So, yeah.
I would have to say communicating with the member one-on-one would be the most effective, just because you are clarifying to them that they are a part of cabinet and they are serving as one of the faces for the general public, whether that's general members, core members, or other organizations. In addition, it was having transparency that that's their role and that comes with the responsibility of being a member on cabinet. Just needs to be clarified. And lastly, I would stress that professionalism, as Cora once said, everything that you kind of post and put out there can be scrutinized by anyone who sees it, especially if that's a future employer or something that that person may want to enter into the future. And you don't want one social media post representing them as an individual as a whole. So,
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. Your fellow cabinet member consistently posts inappropriate and unprofessional content on their alternate social media accounts. How would you address the situation?
I think you have to really set the ground rules. You have to be like, hey, that's not okay and that's not very professional, because ultimately you represent Upvine. You are a representative of Upvine, and please take it down, because that's just not okay, and Upvine does not condone alcohol or drugs whatsoever. You're just really being strict. And although they might be your friend, you have to realize that they're a part of this cabinet as well. And you have to really separate that line between your personal life and your business life, and anything on the internet stays.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. Your fellow cabinet member consistently posts inappropriate and unprofessional content on their alternate social media accounts. How would you address the situation?
I think on the first incident, I would reach out to them and just talk to them. It doesn't have to be something like scary or stern to get your point across. It's just being friendly and reminding them the core values of Upvine and how professionalism coincides with that. And if it becomes a consistent thing, it's just maybe asking the vice president or president to step in, because something consistent is something to take notice of. People use social media as an outlet. So if they're posting things like that, maybe they're trying to get a point across or they're asking for help. So it's just checking in with them and making sure that everything's okay.
So starting with Nikki, you'll also have a minute to answer this question. The question is, Cabinet looks at the board as being the top board, and it prevents some cabinet members to voice their own opinions. So how would you and E-Board work together to ensure that all boards are equally represented?
when it comes to being on E-Board, I would say that there is that stigma. I do sense it in a sense as a general member. However, being a member on CAB would also mean that, hey, we're all equals. We all should be seen as equals. My opinion is not more valid than yours. I'm just as welcome to talking about any questions or concerns, and speaking about problems rather than me being seen as the one making the shots in a sense, me or E-Board being the ones making the shots. In a sense, just remind them that we're all on CAB for a reason, and without diverse perspectives, we will all just be stuck in groupthink, and that's not going to get the organization anywhere when it comes to growth.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Sure. All right, so Cabinet looks at E-Board as being the top board, and it prevents some Cabinet members to voice their own opinions. How would you and E-Board work together to ensure that all boards are equally represented?
I think in general, all of Cabinet are equal, all voices are equal, and we should remember that we're all here for a reason. We all represent Akbayan, and it's just so important, and just having that clear line of communication amongst all of Cabinet, and just really go one by one, just asking what they want to see and what concerns and questions they might have, and just being there to support everybody, all Cabinet positions, no matter if it's E-Board or pillars or promotions.
I think my favorite part of the Constitution is where it defines like everybody, and it's you're a person first, a student second, and your cabinet member third, and your position is fourth is last. And for me, that just like, signifies that as cabinet, we're all united. And if you do have those distinctions of E-Board and programs and pillars, I don't think that it's like a hierarchy. I believe it more to be like different positions in different places. And it's just being comfortable with them and building those bridges so they're comfortable to voice their opinion. It's also just reminding them and giving them the opportunity to voice their opinions as well.
Could you please repeat the question?
Sure. The question was, Cabinet looks at E-Board as being the top board, and it prevents some Cabinet members to voice their own opinions. How would you and E-Board work together to ensure that all boards are equally represented?
So while E-Board is the board that oversees the entirety of Cabinet, the remaining boards are just as important as the executive board, because without the other boards, we won't have Akbayan. We won't have our pillars, which are the foundation of Akbayan. So understanding that we are all on Cabinet for a reason. We all have similar goals. We also have different goals. But to understand that first and foremost, we are people. There are certain things that we want to do, and our opinions are just as important as those around me. Everyone's opinion is important. And if you set that from the get-go and create an environment where people feel that they will voice their opinion, I don't believe that could be a problem.
Thank you. Starting with Karina, one of the ways the secretary position gives its cabinet support is by hosting logistical check-ins. Within a minute, explain the logistics needed to host a general workshop.
Could you repeat the question, please?
Yes. One of the ways the secretary position gives its cabinet support is by hosting logistical check-ins. Within a minute, explain the logistics needed to host a general workshop.
I think first you would have to start with just what does Cabinet want for their workshops? What are they looking to teach to all of our general members? And then next, making sure that whatever room or whatever we have is reserved, and just making sure that all technology works, making sure that everything works, everything is going to run smoothly, making sure when we have technical difficulties, making sure that is addressed immediately.
I think during the logistical check-in is just going over the most basics that coincide with the secretary position, which is like when, where, how many people, and then it's like taking that and expanding upon it. So it's like, what is the topic of the workshop, or what will be needed? Is it communicating with guest speakers to come in? Is it getting other props or materials needed, such as projectors or speakers? And even just like making sure that there's backup plan in case anything fails. And most importantly, just like having that all consolidated like on one document. So it's all there recorded, everything that you would need. So just kind of like a guideline to follow as the event occurs.
Could you please repeat the question?
Yes. One of the ways the secretary position gives its cabinet members support is by hosting logistical check-ins. Within a minute, explain the logistics needed to host a general workshop.
So the logistics needed to host a general workshop is I would first go over the EPS with them, because I know that an EPS is required for every event. Being an intern, I know that that's important. So again, that will hit on where the venue is, what the responsibilities of cabinet is, what's needed regarding technology or speakers, the venue. But again, to just address the responsibilities of cabinet and what I can help them with and what they need and what they already have done. Or
When it comes to a logistical check-in, first and foremost, I would ask what their topic is, how many members they would expect to be coming, what venue they may or may not have in mind already, whether that's, which all the information may be provided in an EPS. I know it's a 6-week span, but a lot of information can be referred back to an EPS, but it's just more of checking in with them and making sure that their EPS may or may not be missing information that they haven't thought of, that may come to mind further down the process of creating a general workshop, whether that's tech, guest speakers, or just other ideas that they may want to do.
Is that it?
Yeah,
Okay.
we started with Korea.
Start with Kareem. Perfect. So the next question, starting with Eric, is: with recent changes to campus policies as well as the growth of Akbayan, there have been many issues with obtaining rooms, let alone rooms that are big enough for our general members. So how are you going to deal with these obstacles?
I think first and foremost with dealing with an obstacle like that is just getting very familiar with the policy and making sure you understand it in its entirety, and then working around that. So maybe if it's hard to get a venue to hold all the guests attending, maybe think about splitting the event or having it twice or having multiple of the same one, so there's more opportunities, more days, and more times for people to attend. Or it's just having those backups and looking externally. If campus policies are preventing us from having an event here, we can always look elsewhere.
please repeat the question.
Sure. With recent changes to campus policies as well as the growth of Akbayan, there have been many issues with obtaining rooms, let alone rooms that are big enough for our general members. So how are you going to deal with these obstacles?
For starters, I believe that I should, as a secretary or elected, I believe that I should be aware of the events that are currently going on. So times like PCN, friendship games, and camp revealing will typically bring in more members. So understanding the basis of the events, what's needed, and what time of the year it is, because that will really determine the size rooms we need. So really just being aware of what's to come, openly communicating with cabinet, to be aware of what's expected.
I would have to agree with Eric, knowing that this is an ongoing issue and it's seemingly only going to get worse from now on. Looking to outside venues, whether that's the church or anything local and close by. I know that there's only a limited amount of space on campus when it comes to even lecture halls and whatnot, but looking into more options for venues on campus or outside of campus that are close by but still accessible would be the best option, in addition to worst case scenario, the workshop or any other event may have to be a separate day or separated days, but ideally I understand that it would be a one-day event. Could you repeat the question, please?
With recent changes to campus policies as well as the growth of Akbayan, there have been many issues with obtaining rooms, let alone rooms that are big enough for our general members. So how are you going to deal with these obstacles?
I think you have making sure that I understand the campus policies, as well as knowing how many people are going to attend based on the RSVP, as as well as making sure how much space can we fit with said RSVP, the amount of Gen members that we have. But in the case that we can't get any rooms reserved on campus, we could always do amphitheater or church or any outside open space, as well as any like off-campus venues such as the church. And just making sure that we have a clear communication, and if we can't get a room for just one event, just separating it into multiple events at different times.
Thank you. Starting with Cora, this is your last question for the debates. What makes you a stronger candidate than your opponents? And you may respond within 1 minute.
I believe that what makes me stronger than my fellow candidates is my youth. Understanding that there is a change in what Akbayan needs, and I believe that a lot of that is regarding new focuses. So taking care of yourself, mental health, which really aligns with the position of academics. But I do feel that the position or the organization has really went back to its roots with the social aspect. But I believe that being a young member of Akbayan, this being my first year, I believe that the needs are changing. So I believe that my youth really can contribute to that and understanding what the new direction that Akbayan is going to move towards.
I would have to say my experience. I have previous experience outside of Akbayan, but being a member for a consecutive of 3 years, I understand that Akbayan has growing needs and growing needs, and seeing that before my own eyes, I want to participate in helping the change that this org may need, whether that's larger venue spaces or just cohesion between general members, cabinet, and board members, but just creating accountability and transparency between all three categories and the Akbayan community as a whole. I believe that my experience throughout various aspects of the org makes me the strongest candidate.
I think what makes me a better candidate is my real life experiences with, like I said, my day of percussion, which I have emailed donors, and without those donors we probably wouldn't have a day of percussion. And just being an intern has taught me just leadership skills and just applying it to the real world. And being a future music educator, you wear a lot of hats, and you have to be very supportive for all your students, and also being respectful of all students and staff, as well as just making sure that you are organized, you have a clear line of communication, and you keep some transparency amongst all of cabinet. And I think that's just very important, and that's why that makes me the better candidate.
I believe what makes me a stronger candidate is my passion and determination. You know, we always talk about like event services and our rooms being rejected, but for me, I don't take that as like, oh, we can't do it, we have to look for alternatives, but it's also just like documenting that and like talking to event services, because there really isn't another organization like Akbayan. Like, we have greater needs, and if they can't be met, we should rely on our campus and our school to like meet those needs. Just because policies work for other organizations doesn't mean that we should adhere to those, because general members will pay the cost of that. So I feel like for me in this role, I really just want to make those changes for future secretaries to, not have to deal with that, and they can, explore other options and, really just make their position their own.